Andy, as we come on to our second episode of the week, I still am struggling with how to open these. And I think I'm just going to go with like a cold open, like straight into it.
Okay.
I have nothing like,
No nonsense.
why do I have to, I mean, like they know who we are. I'm Dave, I'm Andy, and you're Dave, right?
You don't know who you are.
Yeah, we all know who we are. Why do we have to say, maybe I do. Maybe it's the early onset Alzheimer's, Andy. So how are you we are recording on a Thursday and where we'll release this Thursday night, Friday morning. Andy, how are you at the end of this week?
Well,
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm just going to cut you off real quick.
yeah, obviously. Yeah.
You were Nostradamus again. Last episode, you called that the Lions were going to be in the top 5, and here you are. So take credit.
Dave, thank you. I'm not going to say that, I'm all knowing. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I nailed it, So, hey, I'm here to give the world accurate predictions, brilliant analysis, and entertaining snippets of comedy here. So whatever you need, whatever America needs, that's what I'm here for.
That's the Andy I know and love. That's the one I love. So, Andy, we have a full agenda today. We got a lot of topics to run through in a short amount of time. So let's just jump into it. Andy, we're going to do a quick sports check-in. I've got a really quick one because look, my team's out. Everyone knows that anguish that I've been through. I was watching the Phillies and the Braves last night, and Bryce Harper had 2 home runs. Bryce Harper is a controversial figure in the world of baseball. I mean, he came up very young. He was proclaimed like LeBron James to be the next big thing, and he's lived up to a lot of those expectations. But when he was with the Washington Nationals, he got a lot of grief because of the way he played, and everyone was a little upset about that. They thought he should be more deferential to the older generation, and they thought that was bad. The Phillies paid him over $300 million for 10 years. I think that's what the contract was, 330 over 10 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I'm here to say, I think he's wildly underpaid, if that's a thing. This guy continues to deliver. He loves being in Philadelphia. Everyone asks why he went to Philadelphia. And this guy, I mean, you see the way when he hits home runs, and this is why I love social media, because you can get on and get the clips from varied number of people. They posted. Those people love Bryce Harper. He fits that city. I think the Phillies are like robbing him blind by paying him just that amount of money for that period of time. So anyways, that's my sports check-in. I really think that Bryce Harper, like I've turned the corner on him. I really enjoy watching him play. I enjoy watching him play in Philadelphia. So Andy, that's where I'll just start.
Yeah, I think it's great to see, in the world of professional sports, people get paid a lot of money, and sometimes you have to really question the return on investment. It's good to see when it does pan out and somebody really lives up to the hype around them. So that's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah, I thought so. So anyways, Andy, we got a big weekend ahead of us for our sports team. So we'll check in with the rest of sports next week. But Andy, let's get into some other topics here. We talked on 2 things on Tuesday on our earlier pod. We talked about Israel and the Speaker of the House, and a lot of things continue to develop both on those fronts. Andy, I'll turn the mic over to you on Israel, but I did want to just note, I find it extremely fascinating watching this play out through social media, and to see all the commentary, to see the people who are sharing and liking and forwarding videos from. We don't know all the sources of where they're coming from.
Yeah,
that's where you really struggle with dis, and malinformation. But I do feel like the commentary around this is really interesting to see play out. And it's really, I mean, frankly, polarizing. I see a lot of, all on one or all on the other. I very rarely see that middle ground on social media. So that was one thing that struck me, Andy. As you've seen this play out over the last couple of days, what have your thoughts been?
Yeah, I mean, Dave, it's obviously, as we said on Tuesday, and as it will remain for a little while here, it's a very dynamic and fluid situation, from what is happening on the ground, the stories moving fast. And I don't think we're here to recap the events, militarily that are happening, I think, but trying to understand what's happening in context, right? And I was thinking quite a bit about, the tragedy of all of this. And, the only thing I think we can do in a sense as spectators is have hope, right? And hope that something good can somehow come out of this, right? And we're both, people of faith. And, I always like to go back to the idea that, all things can work together for good, even the most horrendous tragedies. And so as I look at this, and I was reading yesterday an article I think was really well done in the Unpopulist on Substack, and it's titled "The Palestinian Cause Cannot Justify Hamas's Depravity," and it was written by two authors, Akiva Malamet from Israel, and Shika Damia, who's got some strong things. I believe she is Palestinian, if I recall. And they kind of look at this, and they give no justification for Hamas's actions, and they close sort of with the hope that maybe, just maybe, the Palestinians will realize that Hamas cannot be the answer, and maybe Israel will look at this and say, maybe we need to do something a little bit differently to try and really settle the Palestinian situation in a more peaceful manner, right, after the military response, which is, again, justified and necessary at this point. And for me, I think that's really where I have to kind of look at this is, once the response from Israel is complete, can the Israeli government, this unity government that is currently in place now, can the Palestinian Authority, the non-Hamas part of the Palestinian governance, can the international community come together and actually work towards some kind of sustainable, viable peace? And maybe, given the Abraham Accords, given the attempt to normalize relationships between Israel and some of the neighboring countries in the region, given the desire for some of the Arab countries to go beyond, hatred for Israel and find a lasting peace and prosperity, maybe there is, something good that can come at us on the other end. We're still a while away from that potential, but I'm kind of looking at this and I'm trying to be hopeful that even this crisis, even this disgusting loss of life, maybe some good could potentially come out of it. And that's kind of my hope as we look at this. Again, right now, Israel is about to just completely raze Gaza and chase down every Hamas leader and fighter, and again, rightfully so for what's happened.
Yeah, and again, I'm not going to pretend to know all the intricacies here, or again, keep up with all the operational activity, but it does appear, like Israel is very focused on Hamas and the Hamas leadership, and making sure that they they take the appropriate action for what happened. And look, the atrocities that have come out and the videos that have been shown, and the all the activity that was done in that initial onslaught last Saturday, as all those details are coming to light, those are inexcusable, and they deserve to be taken punishment for those actions. And so I'm not going to pretend to know what the next steps are going to be, but there is going to have to be that time when the military operations are complete, and now how do you transition and how do you build it? Because again, this is not Israel versus Palestine, this is Israel versus Hamas.
Yeah.
And I think it's very clear to put that into perspective, because the Palestinian people deserve better than what they've gotten, frankly. And that, again, it's my opinion, but the Hamas and those groups have shown no ability to really care for the people as they do about, for some reason, the revenge against Israel. So all interesting comments, and again, it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out over the time. I don't know if this is a waste comment, Andy, but I don't know if you saw when we talk about this stuff on social media and some of the outrage that has come out and protests and demonstrations around the world. Have you followed any of that story around Harvard about what the groups around Harvard that signed the petition, the student groups, and now all of a sudden there's some backtracking on there? I don't know if this qualifies as a waste comment, Andy. A lot of people are coming back and saying, "Oh, I didn't know what was going to be in this letter that was written," especially as people are starting to call into question their commitments and such. So, have you seen that, Andy?
Yeah, so I have, and I think this kind of goes to, I was in a conversation with my oldest son, who's a college senior, and he's been trying to look at this, and he's been talking with friends. In his community, he's got friends, Jewish friends, he's got Palestinian and Arab friends, and he's been trying to sort of talk with them and understand what's really happening here, and how do they look at this together constructively. It's been good to listen to them and what they're thinking about. And I think, in the college dynamic, there tends to be a lot of passion, and sometimes that can be misdirected, and people get very strong emotional feelings about causes, and sometimes looking at the youth here, not necessarily more adult leadership, that can be expressed sometimes without a complete understanding of things or insensitively. And I think in this case, they're reviewing sort of their initial response, and that's probably appropriate, right? I mean, I don't want to. I haven't looked at it closely enough to be able to judge, exactly how this came about and what exactly. But before we jump into a position, full speed ahead, I think it's important to take time to pause and reflect and really try to understand what's happening here and take a measured response. And sometimes in the dynamic college environment, that doesn't always happen. So, back to our acronym of waste, right? Wild ass statements, theories, and exaggerations. Maybe this is a borderline wild ass statement kind of thing, but also I think it's probably well-intended support that came out not in the right way. But that's people a chance now to pause and reflect. There's a lot of protest activity occurring around the country. There's a lot of solidarity activity happening around the country. And I think, before people jump into an event, they should really think about, who's organizing it, what's the message, do I support this, do I want to be associated with this, and take some time to reflect maybe on what are the other side, the other parties saying, and is there something there, for me to get out of this. I hope people take a thoughtful, measured response to the events happening on the ground.
Yeah, very, very good comments, Andy. So let's transition then and wrap that one up, and we'll move to another thing and go from a very serious discussion on Israel and what's going on there to I don't know if there's another word other than say like almost like a sitcom event, but we'll talk about the Speaker of the House election that occurred yesterday. We've been talking about politics here for a little while, and I think last week we noted, the Republicans voted out the former speaker Kevin McCarthy, and yesterday they took a vote, and they seem to have an elected new speaker, though there's debate whether or not this is going to go to the full House for a vote or not. But Andy, what I again talking about some waste comments, some wild ass statements. I saw some senators come out in support of, or I'm sorry, representatives come out in support of one individual over the other, based solely because that Jordan from Ohio was a contester of the 2020 election, so they voted for him because frankly he was an election denier, if that's a popular term. So talk about wild ass statements. Here we are, 3 years later, we're still talking about how the election was stolen. I mean, that mindset that just deserves its own Hall of Fame, I think. Andy, where are you at on the Speaker of the House election?
Well, again, Dave, like as I talked about last time, I think, I like chaotic politics. I know there's a lot of folks that sort of limited appetite for the chaos of democracy, but I like seeing it play out. And in this case, you've got two leading candidates from the Republican Party, vying to become the speaker designee, right? So they get their party's nomination, and it seems that Representative Scalise has done that, maybe. And then they go to the full House vote, where the minority party, in this, right now, the Democrats have their own nominee. Their party leader will be nominated, and the House will vote. Presumably, the majority party wins. But because the margin is so thin, it's a little bit dicey, right? And the same challenge that the last speaker had, and the reason he was knocked out of his position, they didn't have a lot of support, broad support, and it looks like that fight's going to continue as we're recording this. The Republicans are set to meet again and try and really solidify their support around one or the other, or maybe somebody else entirely. But I like seeing this play out, because again, I think it gives a chance for people's voices to be heard, regardless of their wild ass statements, regardless of their positions and where they're coming from. They're representing a constituency, and these kinds of fights allow that constituency to be heard and for politics to play themselves out. And so I think it's really interesting to watch this happen. In the House, we've got that. And then if I can mention, Dave, on the Democrat side, last time we were on the on the pod, you talked about wanting to see somebody else besides Biden, right? We've had Marianne Williamson in the race. People seem to be very not excited by her and clinging on to her, as a viable opposition candidate. And now you've got a host of a show, the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur has announced that he's going to run a primary bid against Mr. Biden, and it's interesting in multiple levels. One, it seems like he was trying to get somebody else to run, and nobody was willing, and nobody wanted to challenge President Biden. They wanted to let him, secure the nomination peacefully and move on. And so, so this guy comes up and says, "Well, then I'm going to do it." And he's not a naturalized or not an American-born citizen, so he's gonna try and primary Biden. And like myself, he was born overseas, wasn't a born American, constitutionally isn't eligible to be president, but he thinks he's got a fight to make here, and he wants to take it to the Supreme Court and try and be permitted to serve as president. It's a very interesting sort of thing to see play out. So he's representing a progressive part of the party, which you spoke about on Tuesday's pod. And so it's interesting to see this now starting to happen, right? As RFK leaves the Democratic Party for an independent bid. Now you've got a progressive, from the left challenger to President Biden potentially. Again, a little chaotic, but probably healthy challenges in both the House and on the Democrats. Interesting to see all this play out, Dave.
Yeah, I think it is. I want to see these individuals challenged. I think we owe it to, and I think there's been too much of this get behind the party and party unity aspects that doesn't allow for healthy debate and discourse. Now, I think some of it, when you have debate between some of the more extremist groups and the more moderates, it can get really, black or white or, something. And I don't necessarily like that, because then there's no middle ground for them to come into. But I do like to see people challenge. But I will say, Andy, if we're going to have somebody from outside the United States run for president, I think we probably both would have preferred that person be the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He had quite a good run as the governor of California, and unfortunately he can't run for president because he was not a naturalized U.S. citizen. So anyway, there
was a time when it was looking like he might get support, and then things went sideways for the governor. But there's a moment when it looked like he might get some support to run, and people were willing to try and back him, despite the challenge of having to be a natural born American citizen. So, but just a quick note on that, Dave. Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book, Be Useful, came out this week. I'm glad to have a copy. I'm excited to read it. Great to see Arnold trying to build his legacy and leave numerous things of value to continue on after he one day, hopefully not anytime soon, but moves on to higher ground. So excited about that book.
Yeah, I tell you, his story is really amazing. We make no mistake, Andy and I love Schwarzenegger movies, especially the early the 80s movies, the great ones there. But he's really made a lasting legacy. I mean, his Pump newsletter is great. A lot of great information out there, just very positive. And I enjoy seeing that. And same thing, there's another guy, Joey Swoll, who's also on. He's a gym guy, but he's in that mold too. Is like calling people out and being about positivity and talking about the right way to do things. I think that mindset, we really need to get back to some of that. I know that, look, Schwarzenegger was on some shows last week, was talking about we don't want to raise wimpy kids and all that stuff. And I think people take that too literally. Obviously we want to be connected emotionally and with ourselves, but at the same time is like we have to also challenge ourselves and be in those positions. So anyways, Andy, we'll be interested to see how the House wraps up. I'm sure it'll happen over this weekend. We'll see where it goes from there, and we'll have some more topics of conversation to talk about next week on that front.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so Andy, as we go into the last part of this episode here, anything top of mind for you? Anything you want to call out? Anything you've got going on? You want to mention?
So Dave, there's a few things on my mind this morning, sort of in the other category. So it's I'll just touch football to say as we record this today, there's a Broncos Chiefs game tonight. I don't think anybody cares. I don't think anybody cares about Broncos football right now, right? So
Is Taylor Swift going to be there, Andy? I don't know.
I'm sure she will be. I haven't looked at the odds, but I can only imagine the odds for the Broncos are absolutely horrendous. But I want to talk about just two quick things. One, a colleague of mine, Alan Liska, has been involved in a project I think is just really cool. We mentioned before, I think that, I grew up with comic books, big fans of comic books, and he's been working on a project, a ransomware series starring Johnny Dollar, who's an old-time 1940s radio character, now in the public domain. And so they picked up Johnny Dollar, and they're using him as a detective investigator focusing on ransomware. And so the first issue is just now available. I'm excited to check it out and see it. Alan's been putting some really good work into it. He's a really smart guy, knows his ransomware. We're professionally speaking, we've had a chance to work together a couple times, and I really respect and appreciate him. Really cool to see, ransomware and cybersecurity go into this medium of comic books, both online and a paper copy coming out as well. So thought that was pretty cool. And I've got a comment, Dave, I want to share on the musical end of things, but I'll wait because you might have somewhere else you want to go first.
No, I think that is really neat to see how the whole public domain thing has been fascinating, because a lot of those things came up, and then there's all these, I think there's big things around Peter Pan and some of these other, books from early in the or late 19th century, early 20th century. I think it's fascinating to see those, but those are really neat. I mean, we all have our own, on our professional side, our feelings about ransomware and stuff, to see people develop that kind of stuff from there. No, that's neat. So Andy, that's good. I did want to hit on a music thing. I know I mentioned earlier this week, I was, with my weekend last week, I put together a playlist. You inspired me last week because of your new music Fridays. And I said, let me put together. So I put together a playlist of like early 90s songs. I just started getting into this. I hit Gin Blossoms, and I hit Crash Test Dummies. And I look, obviously there's Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Smashing Trees, and a lot of other great songs. But I came across Bush, and I was like, oh, this is good, with Machine Head and Glycerine. I know you had strong feelings about Bush, I think, didn't you? You were not a huge fan, I don't think.
I went through a phase where I enjoyed them when they first came out, and then just got nauseated by them, I think. So yeah, but definitely a great, there's some great sort of 90s bands you just mentioned and great sounds. And I always enjoy that. I mentioned my absurdly long playlist of 90s music. It's great to hear some of that. And I don't even think the Gin Blossoms are on my playlist. I must go back and revisit that because they had some fun tunes.
They had some fun tunes. I think that, I think it was one of those. I think they had two albums maybe that did. They had the one really big one, and then you had they released the second one, but I don't think that did as well. And it was just interesting to see. But it took me back to those days, and you start thinking through all those songs and what they trigger the memories of, and all that stuff. And I really just. I think I fell back in love with that sound of the way the bands were playing and such. So I kicked that back up, and I did that around. So any music takes for you, Andy? This is going to be a New Music Friday. What do you got on your list?
It is so new music to me, but not new music. So you can see I think this is a subconscious decision. I put my shirt on, wasn't thinking about it, but I'm wearing an AC/DC shirt this morning. I think it was subconscious because the other day I was working out, and I was listening to my usual workout playlist, and I was like, I need to listen to something else. So I put on some Tom Morello. And Tom Morello, if you're not familiar, he used to be the guitarist for Rage Against the Machine. He played with Audio Slave, has done some other projects. He's played with Bruce Springsteen. He's put out some solo albums. So he put out an album in the Atlas Underground came out in, I think it was 2018. And then in 2021, as I knew it, he released the Atlas Underground Flood, which I picked up. I was listening to it. I was enjoying it. Some great collaborations, really got into it, and just kind of focused on the album and moved on. What I didn't realize is that it was a double album, and that he put out both the Atlas Underground Flood and at the same time released a separate album called the Atlas Underground Fire, where again, it was a lot of collaborations. And so I just stumbled upon that, and I was like, oh, I just found a whole new album that I didn't know existed. So I was listening to that, checking it out, getting excited about that. And there's one song, and this is where I bring it back full circle at AC/DC, that I thought was just a ton of fun. which is a collaboration with Tom, Bruce Springsteen, and Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, where they do a cover of AC/DC's 1979 classic Highway to Hell. And it is rocking, right? Hearing the boss, hearing Bruce Springsteen and Eddie Vedder sing that song with Tom Morello, just always taking rock songs and just twisting them up a little bit and making them sound a little bit different. Really, really fun. So not new music, but new to me music. I was really happy to stumble across that little gem, and I've been enjoying it. There's some really other good collaborations on there. Some other artists that are fun to check out, including Chris Stapleton, who I also kind of recently discovered and think, I'm not a big country singer fan, but that guy's got an incredible voice and just a remarkable vocal. So, fun to hear that kind of thing. Really love collaborations and mashups, and enjoyed that from Tom Morello, Bruce Springsteen, Eddie Vedder. I'll share the link. It's worth checking out. Good tune.
Yeah, no, I'll have to listen to that, because Eddie Vedder, Bruce Springsteen is two of my favorites. Very interesting. Like, Bruce has been a favorite of mine for decades now at this point. It is amazing to see him still performing in his 70s here, the way he is. And I know he recently had to cancel a couple concerts this year, or this last couple of months, but he's still going strong. He's released his dates out into 2024. I'd love to be able to get to a concert, much like I'd like to get to the Sphere in Las Vegas, but I'm not sure I'm willing to pony up that price for U2. But it does look pretty amazing there. And Eddie Vedder, seeing how a lot of those early 90s bands, just speaking about the 90s, early 90s bands never went beyond their album number 2. And then to see Pearl Jam the way they are, and Eddie Vedder still performing the way he is, his voice is still amazing to me. And so he does a great job there, and I love listening to that music. But I am deferential to early Pearl Jam more so than the most recent stuff. But hey, look, he's still performing at a high level. So, Andy, I think that wraps up a lot of the things. Anything else on your doc? I know we covered a lot of ground today. So anything else you got? Lingering comments, suggestions, anything you got?
Dave went through a lot of stuff today, touched a lot of things lightly today, kind of following up on some things we talked about earlier this week. So looking forward to continuing this discussion, diving into some topics a little more in depth. And Dave, something we've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks, and just time hasn't allowed us, is we've got a whole host of sounds we want to add into this, and some classic, I think, movie references we want to add into this. We're going to work those in. We're going to get our sound going here. So I'm excited about that. And thanks for
Andy. Do you have something you can play right now?
Dave, I do. I've got so many. So, I've got one keyed up for our new waste section, which I think is appropriate. And then, fans our age will probably appreciate two movies that I can go back to all the time, which are two early 80s classics, Fast Times at Ridgemont High and The Breakfast Club. And so I've got a couple lines, from those movies. Fast Times, Jeff Spicoli, played by Sean Penn, and maybe his greatest role. You've got some great lines from The Breakfast Club. I love that movie. And of course, Dave, because it's you and I had to include a couple of sound bites from our favorite Arnold, who we both mentioned. They get to the Choppa line, a great line from Conan. I'll just play that for everybody to enjoy. A little bit of Conan maybe as we close things out today.
Conan is best in life. Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of your women.
You can't beat that. That is Arnold gold. So, Dave, I've got a host of sound effects queued up. It's just, I've got to manage my sound engineer role in addition to, rambling my mouth endlessly. So something for us to play with and look forward to in future episodes.
Yeah, I love the Arnold quotes. You can never, we might need to pull some Commando quotes. I think that might be his front from start to finish, the best ones for Arnold. But yeah, no, love those coming in, Andy. So that'd be great. All right, so we'll wrap that one up for today, Andy, and we will chat with you next week.